시청자 여러분 안녕하십니까? Ytn과 한국외국어대학교가 공동 주최하는 제5회 고등학생영어토론대회 결승전을 지금부터 생방송으로 중계해드리겠습니다. 2009년 1회 대회를 시작으로 올해로 5회째를 맞이하게 되는 이번 대회는 전국 고등학교에서 모인 85개 팀이 치열한 경합을 벌여서 퍼스트 토너먼트 팀과 모현면 두 팀이 최종 결승에 올랐습니다. 과연 최종 결승전에서는 어느 팀이 우승할지 기대가 되는데요. 먼저 대회 중계에 앞서서 오늘 결승전 도움 말씀 주실 분 소개해드리겠습니다. 한국외국어대학교 통번역대학원 정철자 교수 함께해 주셨습니다. 어서 오십시오.
네, 안녕하세요.
자, 이제 어제부터 이 토론대회가 시작이 됐는데 현장을 다녀오셨죠? 분위기가 어떻든가요?
첫날 예선 85개 팀이 첫날은 4번 이 대회를 다 치러야 되기 때문에 첫날은 열기가 상당합니다. 그리고 둘째 날 오늘 오전까지 85개 팀이 다시 한번 경합을 벌이고요. 그 이후에 이제 본선 16강 팀으로 진행을 하거든요. 그래서 오늘 오전까지 거의 300명 가까운 학생들이 모여서 뜨거운 그런 경쟁을 벌였었습니다.
그런 치열한 경쟁을 거쳐서 최종전에 오른 두 팀이 지금 이제 결승전을 앞두고 있는 상황인데 올해로 이 대회가 지금 5회째 아니겠습니까?
네, 맞습니다.
대회를 좀 소개를 해주시죠.
예, 저희가 5년 전에 이 대회를 시작할 때 영어 토론으로 뭐를 이룰 것인가 고민을 하면서 영어 하면 사실 그 중요성은 이제 제가 더 이상 말씀드리지 않아도 될 정도로 우리 국민 모두가 다 공감하시리라 생각을 하는데요. 근데 영어 노래를 부르면서 여러 가지 방법으로 학생들이 실력을 올리기 위해서 노력을 하고 있습니다만은 이 영어 어떤 언어 실력뿐만이 아니라 토론이라는 어떤 그런 그 능력까지 갖추게 되면 정말 명실공히 언어에다가 어떤 그 비판적인 사고 능력까지 갖춘 정말 국제적인 그 인재를 기를 수 있는데 우리가 일조할 수 있겠다 해서 저희가 이 대회를 시작하게 됐습니다.
그렇군요. 사실 우리말로 토론을 한다는 것도 상당히 어려운 일 아니겠습니까?
네,
그런데 이거를 이제 영어로 토론을 해야 된다라는 게 상당히 이제 준비를 많이 해야 될 것 같은데 최종 결승에 오른 오늘 두 팀, 퍼스트 토너먼트 팀과 모현면 두 팀인데요. 이 두 팀에 대해서 좀 소개를 해주실까요?
퍼스트 토너먼트 팀은 지금 청심국제고 학생들로 구성이 된 팀이에요. 지금 구성을 보니까 3학년 학생 1명하고 2학년 이렇게 학년이 다르게 구성이 된 팀이네요. 그리고 모현면 팀은 지금 용인외고 팀이에요. 같은 학교에서 지금 3학년 동급생들이 나온 팀인데요. 2학년생이 물론 1년 더 토론 경험이 없다라고 할 수 있을지도 모르겠습니다만은 토론이라는 게 어떤 기계적인 그런 훈련 못지않게 비판적인 사고 능력 이런 것이 중요하기 때문에 2학년이라고 결코 아주 우습게 볼 수는 없고요. 지금 또 퍼스트 토너먼트 팀 같은 경우는 5승으로 올라왔네요. 모현면 팀 같은 경우는 지금 이게 지금 방금 제가 말씀드린 게 예선 성적입니다. 5승 다 이긴 거죠. 모현면 팀은 지금 4승 예선에서 4승을 하고 지금 올라온 건데요. 이게 아주 막상막하일 것 같습니다.
그렇죠. 방금 말씀하신 것처럼 사실 학년은 나이는 별로 중요하지 않으니까요. 자, 이제 치열하게 경쟁을 하게 될 텐데 결승전에서 두 팀이 벌이게 될 그 주제는 뭔가요?
이번 고등학교 결승 주제가 This house believes that fossil fuel-based energy companies should pay higher taxes in order to subsidize clean energy technology라고 해서요. 그 화석 연료를 기반으로 하는 에너지 기업들은 청정 에너지 기술 지원을 위해서 더 많은 세금을 부담해야 한다로 주제가 정해져 있습니다.
그렇군요. 그럼 이 주제를 놓고 어떤 방식으로 토론을 하게 되는지 좀 소개해 주실까요?
아마 대회 시작하기 전에 두 팀이 동전 던지기를 해서 찬성과 반대 팀을 결정을 했을 겁니다.
현장에서 바로 결정을 하는 거군요?
결승 직전에 결정을 합니다. 사실 지금 이 결승전 주제는 저희가 한 달 전에 공지를 해서 학생들이 준비를 할 수 있게 하는데요. 근데 이제 사실 이 주제를 가지고 자기가 어느 편에 서서 토론을 하게 될지까지는 결정이 되지 않기 때문에 학생들이 아마 한 달 동안 양쪽의 입장에서 모두 다 서서 열심히 준비를 했었을 겁니다.
그렇군요. 정말 이 주제가 어떻게 걸릴지 모르고 또 본인이 어떤 팀에 가게 될지 모르니까 많이 준비를 해야 될 것 같네요.
예, 맞습니다.
그럼 이게 그 예선전부터 모두 몇 번에 그 걸쳐서 몇 가지 주제에 대해서 얘기를 하게 되나요?
예선이 5회이고요.
네.
그다음에 본선이 이제 4회. 결승까지 해서 4번을 하게 됩니다. 그래서 총 9번의 그 토론을 해야 되는 건데요. 주제가 준비 주제가 있고요. 즉흥 주제가 있습니다. 그래서 반반이라고 보시면 돼요.
준비 주제는 몇 가지나 되나요?
준비 주제가 5개입니다. 그래서 준비를 한 달 정도 할 수 있고요. 이제 준비 주제 사이사이에 즉흥 주제가 그 현장에서 주어지기 때문에 이제 그거는 팀들이 브레인스토밍해서 그 자리에서 전략을 짜서 토론을 들어가게 되는 거죠.
그렇군요. 이게 뭐 준비할 수 있는 기간을 준다고 하더라도 워낙 광범위하기 때문에 준비하는데 상당히 어려움이 있었을 것 같은데요. 과연 오늘 결승전에서 어떤 뜨거운 경쟁이 벌어질지 한번 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 이제 곧 대회가 시작될 것 같은데요. 현장 한번 가볼까요?
나는 계속 해. 근데 스티치하는 게 은근히 그게 은근히 다이나믹한 상황이 바뀌니까
네, 지금 이제 각 두 팀이 자리를 하고 있는데요. 아직 결승전이 벌어지기 직전입니다. 저때 성도 마지막 이제 마무리 서로 이렇게 좀 격려도 하고 그러지 않겠습니까?
예, 맞습니다. 사실 그 한 달 동안 팀이 두 멤버가 서로 협력을 해서 준비를 했다고 치더라도 마지막 아주 치열하게 또 전략을 짜고 있을 겁니다.
Ytn English Debating Championship. First of all, I'd like to congratulate both of the two teams on the stage. On our left, government team first tournament, and the other on our right, opposition team Mo Hyun-myeon. Well done. But I'm sure that their parents are at this time very proud of them. So why don't I call upon their name individually so that we can recognize them, maybe. On government team, Hong Hyun-jin, would you stand up so that we can recognize you, please? Right? And Kim Ji-hoon, right? Lee Chang-kyu, right? Give them a big hand, please. Right? And then opposition team, Jo Hyun-seo and Yoon So-hyun and Lee Jong-hoon. Congratulations. Before we begin the debate, I'd like to introduce the educators this time. We have 9 educators who make a final decision in this championship. I'd like to start with Mr. Scott Wittgenstein. Would you stand up, please? And Laura Selakari. Thank you. Abhishka Dubé. Thank you very much. And we have Kim Hyun-ju. Thank you. We have Son Jun-pyo. We have Im Hee-yoon. We have No Jong-hyun. We have Yu Yi-yeol. Last not least, Hyun Sung-won. Well, under the motion that this House believes that fossil fuel-based energy companies should pay high taxes in order to subsidize clean energy technology, I'd like to call upon the first speaker of the government team to the podium to begin the debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, the fossil fuel-based energy companies right now are basically blocking the use and the proliferation of clean energy technology. Now today in our society, we see that the depletion of fossil fuel is apparently approaching, and we all agree upon, and we hope that the opposition side also agrees on the fact that there needs to be some measures in order to prepare and to counter the situation, a crisis that is evidently approaching. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, we do believe that we need to take a way of gradual change in order to prepare for this energy crisis. And as previous methods were very ineffective because as we see the industry remains big, today we do believe that a gradual measure of taking the responsibility from the fossil fuel-based energy and actually using the money for the development of the renewable energies and the clean energy is the most effective way to counter this crisis, ladies and gentlemen. Now with the money that we gather, we can support both the technical development and the systems that will be fit for use. Now, because development of the clean energy technology is antithetical to the profit structure of the fuel companies right now, we do believe that we should take this measure, today's motion, to prepare for the future by gradually changing the energy dependency. Now, before moving on to any other arguments, I want to first make a simple point of justification here. Because we know that someday throughout this debate, the opposition side will point out that this is an unfair disadvantage. And these companies are basically not privileged and they are going through double jeopardy. However, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make clear right now is that globally, $1.8 trillion are actually invested to the fossil fuel industry. Not to mention that 60% of the government's budget that goes as an investment is basically to the fossil fuel industries, not renewable energy. So especially when this is true, we do believe that they are not deprived of the support of the government. Not to mention that right now, for the externalities, more than 50% of the climate change and the CO2 emissions are from fossil fuel-based energy industries. So we do believe that here there is a justification that we can ask them to be responsible for. So with that stable, let's move on to the definition first, in order for a better debate. Today we want to define fossil fuel-based energy companies as companies that provide energy primarily from fossil fuel, evidently. So we're talking about companies like S-Oil or Shell, where their primary way of producing energy are from fossil fuels, like petroleum or coal. We want to define as subsidies and paying the higher taxes to subsidize, as in the government collecting the money from these companies and redistributing the money towards the cleaner energy industry in a way that the government sees that there can be much more development, ladies and gentlemen. So the decisions will be made within the industry for the best usage of money. So with that stable, let's move on to the arguments. Now today we basically have three arguments in today's case for the government. Our first case is about the governmental responsibility of preparation. In this argument, I'll talk about how there is an energy crisis that is coming and how the government has an evident responsibility to prepare the society for an upcoming crisis or a currently existing social problem. Now, in our second argument about the government's responsibility to protect the environment, I'll talk about how the government holds the responsibility to create the best environment and to maintain and stabilize that environment, because that's the place where the people live in and the government is there for the people's rights. And in our third argument, we'll talk about company benefits, about how this policy, how this motion actually benefits the companies too, and that argument will be elaborated by our perfect Deputy Prime Minister. So with that stable, let's move on to the arguments. Our first argument is about the governmental responsibility. I want to talk about this in two different levels. First of all, what responsibility is there for the government? And second of all, how that responsibility is fulfilled. Now let's look at the first level. What responsibility does the government hold? Ladies and gentlemen, we do believe that the government has a responsibility here to maintain a stable economy, as well as the right and responsibility to prepare the society for an evident crisis that is a social problem that can be upcoming or already existent. Now, what am I referring to right now is that the government should always prepare the society, because in the cases of crisis, it is evident that the people living within the industry and the companies and within the nation will be obviously harmed, not only with their rights to live, but to right to remain with a stable way of life. We think that the government, in order to protect this right, should always prepare the society to possible changes. Now, that is the reason why what the government is trying to do right now is that they are trying to counter the increasing amount of selling of cigarettes and alcohol. Because what they're seeing right now is that health problems are rising, and they know that there will be death continuously rising and rising. That is the reason why the government is taking measures in order to block a damaging feature, ladies and gentlemen, by sin tax or other measures. So now let's relate this back to this motion by moving on to our second level about how this responsibility is fulfilled. Ladies and gentlemen, the government here today in the motion is not prematurely killing an industry, but is simply doing the best it can to prepare for something that will inevitably happen. Now, considering the fact that the depletion of fossil fuel is evident and it is coming, we do believe that there is an evident harm that is going to be inflicted in our society in the near future, or maybe not a near future, but then it's going to happen one day. Now, what we're saying here is that when there is an evident harm, should the government be involved in taking responsibility for preparing for this, ladies and gentlemen? We do believe that the government is absolutely doing so here. No, sir, because the collapse of fossil fuels by going through a decreasing the size of the industry gradually, not by a moment, but by gradually, we do believe that the government can decrease the amount of fossil fuels used and use that industry to boost an alternative here, which can actually support us in the near future. We do believe that the government is taking the best measures it can to provide the best environment for the people in the future, because under this model, what we're going to have is that we are going to have a decreased amount of consumption in fossil fuel, which is obviously going to counter the actual energy crisis. But not only that, we will have a potential alternative, an alternative that can actually be used in our society to counter the decrease of the fossil fuel, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, today we say that under our model, the government is perfectly fulfilling its duty. Yes, sir.
What you're actually suggesting here is that the means by we achieve it should be by having an artificial oil shock, by having an stagflation enough to shock everyone and shift people's consumer behavior. Do you think that will be effective?
So that is not necessarily true here, because as the opposition side is trying to characterize as if the government is going to create an artificial oil crisis, ladies and gentlemen, that is not true right now, because we do believe that the energy itself is inelastic, ladies and gentlemen, which basically means that we are not going to cause any type of dearth in the energy industry. And if it does, if some kind of price rises here, we do believe that that is something that is what we are absolutely aiming for. It's not an oil shock, but it's an increase in price that we need, because with the increase in price, the people can actually feel the changes, and that is the only way we can solve the energy crisis, by decreasing the amount of consumption, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you can simply say that energy costs should be low, but then it should not be, because the rise of the price is the only way we can make people responsible and change consumer behavior. We see that the previous methods that did not touch the price have always failed. Campaigns, advertisements have never been effective, ladies and gentlemen. That's why now is the time for us to touch the price. Let's talk about the second argument here, ladies and gentlemen, about how the environmental responsibilities are fulfilled. Now, let's talk about this in two different levels. First of all, what responsibilities are there? As the environment is basically the ground on where the people live and do their social activities, and as the government respects the people's right to take social activities, and the government is supporting that, we think that the government should also take part and take responsibility in preserving the environment for that ground. Because, ladies and gentlemen, without the environment, we cannot stay in a society. That's why the government holds this responsibility. Now, let's talk about how this is fulfilled. Now, first of all, by the direct decrease in fossil fuel industry size, what we're basically doing is that we are decreasing the speed in which the environment is damaged, because we all know how detrimental the fossil fuels are. I've been saying that more than 50% of the damage is actually from fossil fuels. You're out of order, sir. And therefore, we say that by decreasing the use of fossil fuel, we are basically benefiting the environment. But not only that, at the same time, as we're having a gradual turn towards a renewable energy industry, we say that we are actually having a potential measure that is not going to touch the environment, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking for a sustainable green development here under our policy, and no one will be harmed as long as people will be keeping responsible under the price changes. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, today the government side was fighting for our energy crisis and to counter that energy crisis, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, under that model, we want you to propose. Thank you.
네, 화석연료 기업들에게 세금을 물려야 한다는 찬성 측의 입장을 들어보셨는데요. 김지훈 청신국제고등학교 학생이 첫 번째 토론자로 나와서 얘기를 했습니다. 어떻게 보셨습니까?
예, 일단 정부 책임에다가 이제 포커스를 두고
네.
찬성 쪽에서는 이야기를 전개를 하고 있는데요.
네.
그러니까 미래를 대비하고 결국은 화석연료라는 게 지금 석탄이나 석유 같은 건데 그거는
네.
언젠가는 고갈될 수밖에 없으니까 미래 대비해야 되고 환경 보호해야 되고 그게 결국은 기업의 혜택이 된다는 얘기죠.
네. 자, 그럼 반대측 주장 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
The free market does work and it will work, ladies and gentlemen. We stand on that side for the opposition. Now, the stand on the opposition side is clear. When it comes to the economy, the government's model harms both the fuel industry and the environmental industry. Secondly, we understand in terms of environmental purposes, it also harms the environmental progress as it hinders progress. I'd like to explain that with my constructive and later my arguments. Now, before that, I would like to move on to my rebuttals. Now, I have three major rebuttals. First, firstly about the government. Firstly, the first argument saying that the government duty is imperative because it's a necessary situation, ladies and gentlemen. Well, firstly, ladies and gentlemen, just because it's a high risk doesn't mean that every single instance the government can intervene, ladies and gentlemen. What the government's duty here is not to intervene in every single instance, but instead to do the right decision. And in the instance when it's imperative that the oil industry will run out in 30 years, ladies and gentlemen, the government needs to be cautious, ladies and gentlemen. And they have not thought whether their policy is the best, because we understand the current status quo is going in a right direction, that we believe the free market is working, as I'll explain in my second arguments. Secondly, there was this rise of price, ladies and gentlemen. The government's fundamental basis of their entire argument is saying that if there's a rise of price in oil, if the rise of price in consumers, people will naturally choose an alternative, ladies and gentlemen. But they have not based on facts, ladies and gentlemen. A recent study by the International Energy Committee stated that it needs $50 rise in a single barrel to have effective measures for consumers as well as producers, ladies and gentlemen. What this means, ladies and gentlemen, is either two things. Either the government has a lower price that does not affect consumers and does not persuade consumers nor producers, or second, they have a ridiculously high price that might be effective, but in turn creates an oil shock that is twice as serious as the oil shock in the 1980s, sir. As such, this point does not stand. Also, we would like to point out that the first point about the government side saying, well, fossil fuel subsidies are too high, are not prevalent in today's side's case. We're talking about taxing fossil fuel companies and giving it to clean energy companies. As such, if you want to talk about overpriced subsidies, that will be in another debate. As such, we move on to my arguments, which is firstly economy in terms of free market, secondly environmental progress in terms of natural. Yes, sir.
So if you're talking about clean energy being so expensive, don't you realize that with the status quo, we are going to face a much more serious situation, maybe twice or thrice expensive in the future?
They're neglecting the free market, ladies and gentlemen. The current progress is happening. I don't know why they're neglecting facts. And I'll show you what facts are with my first argument. The economic progress in terms of free market, a market that has worked since the dawn of time, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, we have to understand the natural progression of investment happening. Now, necessity drives investment, ladies and gentlemen. Government pressure does not. We understand the current situation of clean market is the ideal situation in which natural investment can happen because of two reasons. Because firstly, is a dying industry, as they so massively explained. The natural resources of their government revenue is dying, ladies and gentlemen. It's imperative for them to find a new market. And secondly, perhaps more importantly, it's a blue ocean, ladies and gentlemen. This R&D and research has not been fulfilled. Under these two circumstances, we have to understand that these companies are legitimately proposed to go on these investments, and these investments are actually happening, ladies and gentlemen. These companies are fiercely looking for a new alternative. No, thank you, sir. When you look at companies like SK Energy, GS Clean Energy, when you look like other companies, Exxon just last year declared that $60 billion will be promoted to R&D within clean energy, ladies and gentlemen. That's a reason why they're doing this, because the market is driven by necessity, and necessity currently is on the side of clean technology. It's on the side of the opposition side. As such, we understand on these instances the free market will work. No, thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Necessity drives industries universally. How can you explain that in Japan and China, almost no renewable energy development has reached the public sector?
Well, the public sector, we understand, it's in the R&D stage, ladies and gentlemen. As I was explaining in the second half, we're simply not ready yet, ladies and gentlemen. R&D is projected, R&D perfection is to be projected in which perfected in 15 years, ladies and gentlemen. And that happens through free market, ladies and gentlemen, not forcing it, as I'll explain with my point here. Because just forcing money into the market doesn't mean that the market suddenly revives and R&D works, because of two reasons. Firstly, no, thank you, sir. When you're taxing fossil fuel companies, they argue that they deserve this price, ladies and gentlemen, that they have an externality, ladies and gentlemen. But firstly, we understand when it comes to fossil fuel industries, taxation is already implemented, ladies and gentlemen. When you buy oil off oil market, ladies and gentlemen, almost 50% of the price is already taxed, ladies and gentlemen. As such, the government is already taking care of this so-called externality, ladies and gentlemen. But furthermore, the government-side model was very unclear. Which companies are they targeting in their model, ladies and gentlemen? The consumers, the producers, which companies are they specifically targeting? Unless you have that, you don't know which are the actors, so the government side is very vague on this matter, ladies and gentlemen. But more importantly, the fundamental case of the government side is saying that subsidies do work. Well, we say it doesn't, ladies and gentlemen, because of one fundamental factor. The government is selectively choosing which market can be constructed, and history has proven us that this does not work. No, thank you, sir. This does not work because the government is not the legitimate actor, ladies and gentlemen. An example will be the Sohydron company, a famous company in Sweden in which government subsidies was massively pumped into this company, ladies and gentlemen. Under the government side model, this company should have thrived, ladies and gentlemen, but it did not because the government is selectively choosing that company instead of respecting natural free market principles. As such, we understand that natural free market principles are on the side of the opposition. With that, I'll move on to my second argument, which is about environmental progress through natural time, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you, sir. Now, this is a very simplistic argument, ladies and gentlemen. There's a very simplistic case to the government side's argument, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying that the environment will become better if we just pump more money into these industries, ladies and gentlemen. And I've proven you in an economic perspective why it does not work. And this directly leads into my environmental purpose. Because just because you pump money into the environmental progress doesn't mean it just rises up, ladies and gentlemen. Because I've explained the economic perspective. There's also the perspective of, especially energy industries, the concept of crowding out, ladies and gentlemen. Crowding out means that there can be a limited amount of investment done, ladies and gentlemen. The problem with Sohydron, ladies and gentlemen, was that private companies were very reluctant to invest in Sohydron because a massive amount of government industries investment was already there, ladies and gentlemen. Why would you invest in a company that has 80% government investment already, ladies and gentlemen? It's already at its full potential. As such, government intervention here is going against the market principle and doing this crowding out effect that blocks free market principles that have worked, that are working, and they're going to work, ladies and gentlemen. On the other hand, our motto is understanding the market fact, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you, sir. We understand two things. Firstly, this will happen because of pressure of citizens will be inevitable, ladies and gentlemen. As the future progresses, we understand pressure of citizens are already there. Citizens are pressuring the oil industry, other industries to change, ladies and gentlemen. As such, responsible companies must have to follow this because they respect their consumers. Also, we understand, again, the market principle, ladies and gentlemen. If oil companies are taking revenue from oil and oil is depleting, we have to understand to survive in an economic perspective and to survive in an environmental perspective, they have to follow market principles. And they're doing so, as I proven examples of other companies investing in new markets, ladies and gentlemen. And finally, we come to the conclusion that the debate here is not about which side gives more money, it's about time, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to the environmental subsidies, scientists have proved, economists have proved, it takes at least 15 years to have this fully invested, regardless of government subsidies or not, ladies and gentlemen. As such, we understand within 15 years, we understand that free market will work, and despite their attempts, it still takes 15 years to do so. As such, we understand both sides are in agreement. So it just differs which side does give the money, ladies and gentlemen. And we on the opposition side understand under market principles, when the government does it, problems happen. When the free market does it, actual results occur. And for these reasons, we're proud to oppose. Thank you.
네, 반대 측 첫 번째 토론자로 나선 용인외고 조현서 학생의 발표를 들어보셨습니다. 교수님 평가를 좀 해주실까요?
네, 지금 찬성 측에서 정부 책임을 강조를 했다면
네.
지금 반대 측에서는 아니다, 시장 원리로 이게 자연스럽게 조정이 될 거다라는
네.
주장입니다. 정부 쪽에서 일방적으로 지원한다고 해서 그게 효과적으로 될 리가 없고 환경 개선 안 되고 일반 소비자들이 자연스럽게 요구가 있을 거다. 그러면
네.
기업들이 순응해서 될 것이고 또 하나 지금 강조한 게 R&D입니다. R&D에
네.
워낙 이게 시간이 많이 들어가는 작업이기 때문에
그렇죠, 예.
그거를 고려해야지 일방적으로 정부가 지원한다고 되진 않을 거다라는 반대였었습니다.
네, 자 이번에는 다시 찬성 측 얘기 들어보겠습니다.
You already had cancer before the doctor told you. So rather, you should be happy that on the day that you were told that you have cancer, because now you can do something about it. You learned something about what to do next, and you learned how to develop yourself, how to better yourself for your health. Now, you learned that it is a very good day. Now, that's exactly what our policy today is. Now, this policy is most certainly rude, but most certainly it is an awakening to society to propel the necessary transition to clean energy, to renewable energy that we need to develop in order to survive in the near future. Now, the energy depletion crisis, it's already there. There's no use denying it. And this is exactly why this motion is necessary right here, right now, and this is exactly why Team Proposition is proud to propose. Because this policy is the most effective in solving the problem. Now, before I move on to the last part of our constructive case, I'd like to rebuild first upon our first two arguments and then rebut the points made by the opposition. Now, first of all, okay, they said we'll be creating an artificial oil shock. Well, first of all, the artificial part may be correct. Well, the oil shock, not so much. Well, but even if this artificial oil shock is created, isn't this better than the entire energy industry collapsing? No, thank you, sirs. if the entire energy industry collapses, then the entire basis of humanity right now, the entire society will crumble apart, because everything in our society today runs on energy. And we believe that that is much better than just an artificial oil shock that raises the prices a little bit. Moving on. Well, this instance is not only any instance, as they said, because energy depletion shuts down the entire society, which demonstrates the absolute need to propose this motion. Moving on to our rebuilding. Now, they failed to disprove the government's responsibility to prepare for the future, because there is an imminent energy depletion, and the only way to prepare for this is to go through a transition process. Replacement is the only way, because without replacement, how are we going to fill the holes created by the depletion of the fossil fuels, which is already happening as it is? Because we believe that subsidies will go into developing renewable energy and decrease the pollution of the environment. We believe that the first two arguments that we have made are standing perfectly. To elaborate more on our environmental harms argument, we already said that this decreases the use of fossil fuels because this is a form of a sin tax. Moreover, because this decreases the absolute amount of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere. This is pretty much self-explanatory in that it is decreasing the global warming process. And moving on, because we're moving forward with the developing of with the renewable energy, we believe that we're providing two benefits, double the benefit. Now, moving on, I'd like to refute the arguments made by the opposition. Now, first of all, they had an outrageous argument about the free market. Well, first of all, the energy industry is most certainly not a free market, because first of all, the energy industry is oftentimes an oligopoly, at most times monopolies. Just look at the case of South Korea. The energy industry, the company that produces electricity in Korea, there's only one, KEPCO, that produces all of electricity for all the households in the entire nation. And this is exactly why their free market analogy ceases to work. Because, well, first of all, the market that we are talking about is not a free market. So I don't even understand why they brought up this analogy in the first place. No, thank you. Moreover, their example of the GS Energy Group, I'm going to elaborate this a little more in my third argument, but this process of turning to renewable energy is exactly what we want to encourage. And this encouragement happens through the use of subsidies, because by direct investing, government will have a stake inside the decisions made by these companies, and therefore, because the government's interest is in sustainable energy development, we believe that our solution is perfect for this process. Moving on about their argument about environmental process. Well, we believe through investing in renewable energy, without this policy, we have already seen a 10% increase in the efficiency of production, as well as a 12% decrease in the pollution of the environment. These numbers show what we have achieved without subsidizing anymore the energy companies for renewable energy. But if we do subsidize the energy companies from this point, we will only see an exponential increase in the way that we increase the efficiency of production, as well as increase the efficiency of the renewable energy, as well as decrease the harms made to the environment. And moreover, we pumped our money in. They also talked about how private companies will not invest inside these companies, will not invest into the energy companies. But the government has already played a large role. We pumped our money, we pumped all our taxes, and the government used that money into the subways, and we saved the environment. Just look at what KTX is doing and what the metro stations are doing. We saved 12 trees for every KTX ride. That's a lot of trees, because there are a lot of KTX rides in South Korea. Now, moving on to the last part of our substantial case. We believe that through this policy, not only will the environment, as well as the society and the world and the longevity of the world in general will benefit, we believe that this will create benefits for the industry for energy industry and the companies within that industry as well. Pursuing this policy generates wealth for the companies and therefore the country. Let's think about long-term benefits, not just short-term. This will create long-term solutions, and this will indicate the path that energy companies will have to take and should take. Not imposing the motion will beget and foster a world where, when, and this is most definitely happening, fossil fuels run out, we will have no way to we will have no way and no method and no mechanism in order to produce the products, and they will not be able to sell because they don't even have the raw material. They don't have the energy to run the factories. They don't have the energy to produce the things that that we need in this country because there are no resources, no energy, and therefore no products. And then these companies and society will eventually disintegrate, which is exactly what team government and both team opposition will probably never want to happen. Now, this policy is not singularly targeting these companies because these will actually help these companies. For example, Shell and BP, and as they have told us, GS energy companies have already taken big steps in developing renewable energy and clean energy technology. Sir. Even without our enforcement, they're already feeling the need to develop them feeling the need to do this because energies will run out soon. They feel the need. And if the subsidies go to, and then what we're talking about is that the subsidies that after the taxes and we make subsidies to the renewable technology, these subsidies will also go to the companies because the government is giving money to those who are developing renewable technology. And if these companies are already developing new technology, then if we look in net worth that they're losing, they're not really losing. They're gaining because they already have a net increase in the amount of subsidies they get as a fossil fuel company. But if they get more subsidies as renewable technology goes, they don't really have much loss. Rather, they have more capital to develop the renewable energy as well as an opportunity to increase the longevity of their own company. Now, when this policy is set, we'll be able to use these subsidies for the development of the infrastructure of the renewable energy because right now in the status quo we do not have the necessary infrastructure to implement the renewable energy because we don't really have the right technology yet. But if we do use these subsidies to increase and to develop the infrastructure in which we can implement and use these renewable energy sources, then these companies who have used these subsidies to produce and develop their renewable technology will even gain a greater benefit because then people will be able to access, because accessibility increases and the way that these energy will be used is set. These companies will have another market to use other than the fossil fuel markets. So there is nothing that these companies will actually lose because in the end what these companies are doing is that they're gaining another opportunity. They're gaining an opportunity to make a transition, and the key word here is gradual transition. They have a market to sell, and this is exactly why we believe that because all the benefits shift to the proposition's case, we believe that the proposition takes this debate, and we must never succumb to the opposition. Thank you.